Yeah, recording has started. And before we start again, uh, just for the sake of reiteration, if there are any problems like you're unable to hear me or you have a question, stop me immediately, ask me. There is no problem. Okay, so let's start rolling. Now, as you can understand, we are basically dealing with certain central questions. So, they will be dealing with throughout these courses, throughout this entire course, over different lectures. There will be basically four different questions that we'll try to analyze. The first and the foremost question is uh, what should we ask when we deal with the economics of a public sector? Second is why there are different views regarding the economic role of any government. And over time, is it changing or not? Take, for example, I'm just giving an example just regarding this second question. Take, for example, we are seeing this particular phenomenon over the last 2 decades on and off, particularly last 3, 4 years. The privatization of Air India. It's still not been done, but every budget this comes up and something or the other happens and it is keeping on rolling. So let me ask you again the same question. Are there different views regarding the role of government? In this particular case, I am talking about privatizing a national airliner, a government owned airliner. And next, is it changing? Is this role changing over time? Initially, this was an airliner which was a privately owned by the Tata Group. So initially, it was a private thing which was brought under the public sector. And after 60 decades or so, now the reverse is happening. Or the reverse, the government is trying to reverse its 70-year-old decision. So basically, look, the question is what is the economic role of the Indian government in airline industry operating from India regarding one carrier called Indian Airlines? So the next question is how do we go about starting this problem? What are the tools that we should implement? And finally, why I think that one decision is correct, the other is wrong. You think exactly in the opposite direction. So basically, we have to interconnect the political discourse. I'm not talking about the political discourse as done in political science or by sociologists or by the media houses. I'm talking about political economy. And what is political economy? Obviously, you'll understand after a few days. Take, for example, I'm again trying to give a brief hint about what I mean by political economy. Take, for example, Donald Trump, a political figure elected by the citizens of the United States of America. And at the same time, a lot of Americans was, or rather were, cursing him like anything. So there was an opponent to him. She was defeated. He was elected. And within a very few years, the entire thing got reversed. Is it only politics? It's also about the decision that the Donald Trump government took during his tenure as the president of the United States. And what are these decisions? These decisions are not only political decisions, but economic decisions as well. Spending trillions of dollars in maintaining army in Afghanistan. And now, after Trump is gone, you can see the present administration is withdrawing its forces because it's a lot of pressure on the US exchequer, on public money, which can be used for other public goods, for other health benefits, educational benefits, development goals. So, what are the principal sources of this disagreement among economists? I'm not talking about politicians. I'm talking about the economic costs and benefits of political decisions. So it's an entanglement of a lot of subdisciplines. One might say, why did the Trump administration withdrew from the Paris Climate Change Program conference? Basically, I am trying to impose some environmental taxes that might hamper a large economic sector or a producer group operating from the US. Might. Or I might think that even if I reduce those carbon emissions through proper industrial taxation, other countries like China will not do. So the global pollution will remain, but I will lose economically. So it's better for me not to engage. So my cost will be more than the benefit that I will get. Another economic decision. So it's a complex motley of issues where we have to understand basically these four questions. First of all, when should the government intervene in the economy? Remember, all of you who have studied at least microeconomics 1, macroeconomics 1, or HS 2001. I don't think I am leaving out anyone, right? So, among all of you, you must have studied either micro 1, macro 1, or HS 2001. And you must be knowing about a name called Adam Smith and the word laissez-faire, which means leave everything to the market will decide. The government, there is no rule. So the question is, why at all the government should intervene and when it should intervene? Next question is how it intervenes. Is it through giving subsidies or imposing taxes, bringing in new laws? Like, suppose there is a highway in going through the outskirts of the town that you live. Anyone from mm, in and around Nimrana in Rajasthan? Any one of you? Anyone from Salem, Tamil Nadu? Anyone from Asansol, West Bengal? I'm just giving up random names. If yes, just raise your hand in and around. Or any town, you belong to a town which is very close to a national highway. Excellent. Excellent. I have 5 hands. Now 6. Very good. Now I'm asking this general question. How many times as a kid you saw road accidents near there or have heard about that road accidents are happening in and around that stretch? Because there are a lot of violence that connect to the national highway, the violence connecting your town to the national highway. So there are a lot of junctions in and around those areas, mostly without a traffic signal, and road accidents happen. Now the question is, what to do with a bad, gory thing about road accidents? Loss of life, loss of private property like the car or the bike, damage to human body, medical costs, and a cost borne by the government in repairing the road, costs borne by the government by giving medical treatment in the nearby health centers, government owned health centers. So, look, the cost is actually very sky high. So, what should the government do? Most of these cases, we have seen that the initial national highway has been replaced by flyovers, with violence coming down the flyover and then entering the nearby towns or cities. So those who are going, not entering the town, they just take the fly to bypass the town. And these have reduced these economic costs. And such some costs are absolutely immeasurable, like loss of life. You cannot measure the loss of life. No money is equivalent to the loss of a life, of a permanent damage. So instead of those costs, it's better to invest public money to build flyovers or bypass roads such that these accidents are minimized. So you are incurring cost to reduce cost. That's the trick. So how should it intervene? Next question is, what is the effect of those interventions? Sorry, I got disconnected. Is it visible again? And am I audible?
Yes, sir, you're audible and it's visible.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, look, what is the effect of these interventions? What is the effect of output tax on polluting industries? So there is a concept of private cost and benefit and social cost and benefit. We'll study tomorrow. But in general, if take for example, you do not dispose the garbage from your hostel room in a proper manner, your cost even initially might be very low, but the cost of the neighboring hostel mates is lot. Now over time, they might befriend you and advise you, or they might simply avoid you. So your costs keeps on increasing. So what if IIT Hostel Management Authority starts imposing a fine, maybe a nominal paltry sum of money, if violators are being apprehended? Now this money can be an incentive for you to dispose the garbage in a proper way. Because the private benefit to all your neighbors in an aggregate is higher than the private cost. I'm assuming that there is a cost of properly disposing the garbage. So there is a private cost you are incurring while properly disposing the garbage is much smaller than the social benefit. So these types of effects are there. Next question, and the final question is, why do governments choose to intervene in the way that they do? So, was there an alternative to it? Is this particular policy, is particular measure, this particular action, this particular law, this particular tax better than the alternatives available to the government? So when we talk about public finance, basically we, in a very broad sense, try to understand the role of the government in an economy through these four questions. Now, the basic idea that anyone can have when he or she hears the word public finance, the first thing that comes to their mind is the taxes imposed by the government and the spending activities of the government. However, there is a fundamental difference that the issues which we'll be dealing with are actually which are being dealt with are not financial in nature, because we relate to real resources of the economy. Because suppose that example that I'm creating a flyover to minimize accidents, I'm using real resource, capital, labor. I'm using public money to purchase real resources to create a public good in the name of a flyover. And that is why the word public finance is a very small subpart of what we are actually going to do in the name of public economics or public sector economics or economics of the public sector. Financing is only a subpart or subset of the entire problem. Again, an example. I know that the cost to the government while creating a flyover is high, but it's still less than the overall social benefit of that flyover. But how to finance that flyover? What type of taxes shall I put? Shall I put taxes, extra taxes on the public residing on that town? Or shall I apply taxes on any car in the form of a toll plaza who crosses that flyover? Now comes public decision. If I impose a special tax on the residents of that particular town, there can be political unrest. People might say it's the government's duty, why should we pay? Most of the time we do that. We all the time blame the government, whichever government is that. So people from Bengal can either blame Didi or Modi. People from Delhi can either blame Kejriwal or Modi. But they actually blame the government in some form or the other. But they do not understand where the government will get the money to finance these development issues. So the tax can be in a very different form. The government, the municipality, might simply impose a new tax which increases the electricity bill. So the surplus there can be used in the construction of the flyover. Now, the other option, create a toll plaza. Remember, the fourth question, what are the alternatives and which one is the best alternative? Create a toll plaza. Anyone using the flyover has to pay a toll. The question is, then you are actually incentivizing people not to use the flyover. Go back through the old road and the actual problem of accidents are not solved. Because most of the people will say, okay, it will take 2 minutes more. Why should pay 100 rupees as toll for this very small flyover? So look, the issues are not that simple because we are talking about public money, we are talking about collective action, we are talking about public choice. Suppose all 75 of you, as I can see here, okay, there are more, 79 now. Apart from me, there will be 78. So all of you are given an option that one day someone, the government, will treat you for the lunch. The problem is everyone has to have the same thing. You can understand how difficult that problem is. So all 70 odd students has to decide on a particular dish. Only then you will get the free lunch. Else you will not. Even that creates so much of discussion among you. Now think of public choice in the sense I am telling. So these are the intricacies through which we have to fly through. Now we have to think of mathematically solving these problems. Now we will repose the study of public sector as a study of economic efficiency. So remember which one alternative is the most efficient option. Imposing a tax, creating a toll, doing something else, public borrowing. Which one is efficient? Means in which the social benefit is maximized. The distribution. Who is happy, who is unhappy? How to make at least someone happy without making any other one unhappy? And the economic policy of the government in achieving those targets. Because we will be not only concerning about how to collect money and spend money by the government, rather every aspect of the government interaction in the economy. Look, your private decision of whether to use a bicycle in the campus or your decision using a scooty or maybe a two-wheeler in the campus, individual decision, that depends on the petrol prices, the taxes on per liter of petrol, center and state. So your everyday life is affected by some government policy or not, or other. So we will also talk about market failure. Now, can anyone tell me what is market failure? Can anyone tell me what is market failure? Yes.
It could be a case when the markets are unable to control the economy, like it goes out of hand, there's too much of inflation and
No, no,
everything
no,
just
no,
collapses.
no, no, no. Do you remember the
It
concept
didn't
of
turn
Sir,
out
Elliot?
to be as.
Pardon?
Oh,
sir,
didn't
So
turn
when the
out to be
market
as
doesn't,
expected.
okay.
A market doesn't perform according to the performance, according to the expectations of people.
No, no. That is a different thing. That is
Sir,
mismatch of expectations.
so inefficient distribution of the goods in the market.
Do you remember something called deadweight loss? Do you remember that
Yes, sir.
word?
Yes,
Deadweight
sir.
loss. Yes. That is the efficiency we're talking about. That is the market failure we're talking about. Suppose you have a monopoly. Remember the two triangles deadweight loss generated in monopoly? Because you are supplying less at more money. Had there been perfect competition, unit price would be low and much more quantity will be supplied. So exactly that is what we are calling a market failure. Now, not only a market failure, but market failure due to existence of externalities. What are externalities? Externalities are those.
Sir, you're not audible.
Please hold on for a second. Sorry for this disturbance. Please hold on for this second. ধ্রুবদা, আচ্ছা ল্যানে কোনো প্রবলেম হচ্ছে আজকে আমাদের? একটু খোঁজ নিন তো, কন্টিনিউয়াসলি কানেকশন কেটে যাচ্ছে, ক্লাস নিতে পারছি না অফিসে বসে। একটু প্লিজ খোঁজ নিন তো, আর যদি কিছু হয় আমাকে একটু প্লিজ জানান, বা কার সাথে কথা বলতে দেখতে পারবে। আচ্ছা ঠিক আছে, ওকে ওকে, ঠিক। Yeah, sorry, but I had to report this problem to the office because intermittently my LAN connection is going out, office LAN, and that is why I'm going out and coming back. So again, so externalities are those effects which are not being are possible to capture by market prices. Suppose there is, as I just gave that example of a polluting industry. What is the price of that pollution? Very difficult to measure. And market prices, what are market prices I'm talking about? The prices that that industry pays for its raw materials, labor, or the prices that industry gets for selling its output. None of these prices capture the price of the pollution which it generates. And that is what we call externality. Now, That is very important in studying our problem, because if somehow I can measure some extent of the cost, social cost of pollution, I can normalize or internalize that cost by imposing certain production taxes. Again, a part of government intervention. We'll also be dealing with a topic like, why should a person earning in this economy, understanding the importance of national defense, evades tax? So, what are the personal benefits that has to be kept in mind while designing the tax system? Why should we be dealing with bureaucratic decision making? Why bureaucratic? What is meant by bureaucratic decision making? You have seen, take for example, if you face any problem, the first point of contact is the faculty advisor. Then, if he can solve, it's head. If he cannot solve, then the dean, and finally, the registrar or the director himself. So there are layers of the mechanism. The institution had different layers, and at every layer, certain decision is being taken. So it might be a very small, insignificant municipal corporation that might come up with a tax structure to finance a flyover. It might be the state government. It can be the district administration. It can be the central government. So depending on what type of economic policy or economic problem I have at hand at the moment, there are these layers of administration to deal with it.
Sir, I had a doubt.
Please.
So you're speaking about deadweight loss, right?
Right.
So when those deadweight losses grow out of proportion, that's when we have market failure.
If
Like,
there is a deadweight loss, it's a case of market failure.
okay. So a good market would not have these deadweight losses.
I'm not saying it's a good market. I'll say there is no case for market failure. Market failure is a technical term.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Now there is a problem because I think you have not studied that. Have you studied non-linear pricing, Abhinav? Somewhere?
No, sir. I've done only HS 2001.
Okay, right. Okay, you are not even from the economics course. Right, okay. Okay, so I will suggest that there is a micro book by Pindek Rubenfeld. Do you remember? Or have you heard of?
Yes, sir.
So there is a very nice storytelling sort of discussion on deadweight loss. Have a look. That will. Remember, Jyoti asked me, if I'm not wrong, that what shall we study? Because we have forgotten most of the concepts. So thanks, Abhinav, you brought up this point. Now I can actually tell you, yes, you just brush up the deadweight loss from chapters on market from Pindek Rubenfeld. I am writing down the name of the book.
Sure, sir. Thank you.
So now, the next thing which is very important to understand is something what we call positive versus normative analysis. Positive means what is that is happening or how is it happening. Normative is what should have happened, what should be achieved. So this course will also initially frame what should happen. So depending on the problem, what should be the decision that the government should take? Now you have the alternatives and see which one is feasible, which is tractable, which is doable. So choice, suppose you have a set of alternatives, then choosing the one which gives you the best result. So the framework for this entire set of lectures will be based on market efficiency. The first thing that we should study is what is an efficient market. Efficient market means, if you remember, do you all, I'm absolutely sure, even for non-economic student, you should remember the concept of the production possibility frontier, right?
Yes, sir.
Right.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
It tells you that I have the upper envelope where, given the resources available in the economy, the upper envelope tells you the different combinations of the two goods that the economy might produce. But we are ignoring one important part. The economy might produce within that envelope also, but that would be inefficient. So the concept that I have a production possibility frontier and the economy is operating on the frontier, by definition, assumes that the markets are efficient. That might not be the case. There can be deadweight losses, there can be market failures. The next very important part where we'll spend a lot of time is another concept called efficiency and equity. I might say it is very efficient that you block all the connections to the town from the highway, keep only one with a proper traffic signal. But that will increase the travel cost of all the residents who stay away from that one traffic signal. So which one is a better option? Someone say they put traffic signal in each and every connection. But that will not be efficient because then the cost to the government will be much more. Then the option, create a flyover, keep the connections as they are. Those who are not entering the city will fly in. Just use the flyover. So we have a lot of cost benefit analysis, but here the costs and benefits that we're talking about are not simple costs and benefit. We're talking about social costs, we're talking about social benefits. Then obviously, when it comes, okay, let's create either a traffic signal or a flyover. In either case, it's a public good. So you have to study public goods and public choice. And production of public goods. Now, production of public goods is quite different from the production that we have studied. How? Because the choice now for the economy is either to produce private goods or public goods. So now redefine the production possibility frontier as, suppose the x-axis has private goods, the y-axis has public goods. So the choice of the economy to use the resources efficiently, to choose the most efficient bundle of public and private goods. And then we have the study of excellence. Now these first two bullet points gives you a very nice idea about the normative analysis. What should be done? Now comes how it should be done, which is feasible. Then we come to the production, the idea of taxation. And we spend a lot of time on it. Because this is the tool through which I generate the funds to create public goods. Because you are not going to pay any money for any public good that is to be provided. Do you pay any money when the roads inside the campus are built? No. Or do you pay any money when the road outside the campus connecting to the railway station, Kharagpur railway station, is being maintained? No. So there must be certain form of taxations or raising fund to create those roads, to create the health facilities, to create national defense. And then comes this bureaucratic part, and that is what we call the federal structure. So you have a center part, you have a state part. So there are centralized decisions, there are decentralized decisions, and the connection between them. And that is what is the topic of fiscal federalism. And then this part I will ignore mostly because this has been a part of macro too. The fiscal policy and stabilization or international finance, open economy, macro economy. If time permits, we'll do. But my focus will be to give you a rough idea of this in the context of the Indian economy. So, fiscal federalism, fiscal policy and stabilization, and the Indian economy, so that you have first-hand knowledge about how the economy is operating. So, for this entire theory part, these four are the references. Just let me know whether you get hold of these textbooks. If not, then I have to somehow arrange so that you get. This is available, this is available, this is available. This one you can ignore for the time being, or also let me just drop it. Let's not use this because I'm sure that the availability of that book is not good. The online availability. These three are available online. Just get hold of. So I'll stop sharing now. And let me come back. Okay. So if you have any questions, please go ahead. We have, say, 5 minutes with us.
So you were telling the example of we can't evaluate the cost of pollution, but we can how it impacts the lives of people. We can identify it in some other way, right? The price of like the pollution industry generates.
No.
So
Yes, Jyoti, you're absolutely right. But if I am not mistaken, I said it's very difficult to measure the cost of pollution
okay. So,
because it's not only the immediate neighborhood which gets affected. Have you seen there is a very nice documentary on Chernobyl? If you get time, have a look. It's a BBC
yes.
documentary on Chernobyl. See how the Chernobyl disaster had polluting effects on entire Europe within a span of 48 hours. So nowadays they have this GIS mapping and every data. Now they can create the map, and there's a very interesting visual where this radiation clouds were moving from Chernobyl, the epicenter, to across the globe over time. So it's not only the nearby, the vicinity. The globe in itself has a cost, which is very difficult to measure. What you are saying, Jyoti, actually, if I want to see, take for example, uh, the impact of a polluting industry, or per se creating a new industry, uh, a mining sort of thing as well, in and around a certain forest or tribal areas in India, there had been a lot of political protests. But the major focus that we will have is not the political part, but look, the livelihood of those people are done. And there is a strong impact, economic impact of pollution in and around, which can be immediately in the short run. There are long run the problems also. And that is why I'm not saying it's not being measurable. It's measurable, but it's quite. There is a study on the use of a particular pesticide called endosulfan in the coffee plantations of or rubber plantations of Kerala. And that study particularly found out that the cost of endosulfan can be measured only if you take a window of 25 years. Any window of less than 25 years will not give you any estimate near the damage of endosulfan possible. So that is why it is measurable, but very difficult.
So we will measure the direct costs incurred at the moment directly.
And that is how you can somehow use certain laws. We will study about that also. It's called private property, and there is something called a Coase theorem. We'll talk about it also, like how to introduce property rights to autocorrect this problem. Suppose there is a river, upstream there is a polluting industry, downstream there is a village, and the village people use the water for fishing, for drinking water, something of that sort. So how shall you use property right, like giving right, legal right to use the water of that river to the villages or to the polluting industry to autocorrect this problem?
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
We'll call it Coase theorem, and we'll use that. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, then if you do not have any questions for today, We'll again meet at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. And we'll start with externalities tomorrow. Okay, let me stop the recording.